Okay, in this video we're going to talk about names of bones. And you're going to have to learn most of the names of the bones except for some of the particulars with the wrists, ankles, hands, and feet. Other than that, you're going to need to know them. So anyway, here's the standards and objectives. Pause and peruse. Okay, what names of bones do you already know? So let's see, what do you know already? Maybe you know more than you think. All right, first we're going to cover the bones of the axial skeleton. So the skull and the associated bones. So we have the cranium. The cranium is made of 8 fused bones, and you're going to need to know those names. We have frontal, parietal, that's up here, temporal, close to your ears, occipital in the back. So let's review them. Frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital, frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital. The only names for the associated bones of the skull, I'm not making you remember all the facial bones, okay, are the mandible, the lower jaw, so that's one of the facial bones. The ossicles in your middle ear, the malleus, the hammer, the incus, the anvil, and the stapes, the stirrup. And then the hyoid bone right here, okay. Mandible, ossicles, hyoid. Then the thoracic cage, so the sternum, right here, your heart protector, okay? Well, it has a couple of parts to it, right? So 2 parts are what I want you to remember. The manubrium, that's at the top where it kind of bulges out, where it's wider up here, that articulates with the clavicles. And then the xiphoid process, that little bit at the end, that is the inferior end. So the manubrium is superior, the xiphoid process is inferior, but the whole thing is called the sternum. Okay, also in the thoracic cage are your ribs. So you have costal cartilages that connect your ribs to the sternum. So the first 7 pairs of ribs, okay, you have 12 pairs of ribs. The first 7 are true ribs, meaning they attach directly to the sternum. Then you have the remaining 5 pairs of ribs that are called false ribs because they either attach indirectly to the sternum or they don't attach at all, okay? So 1 through 7, true ribs, okay? 8 through 12, false ribs. And then the last 2 false ribs are also called floating ribs because they don't attach to the sternum at all. So we have 7 pairs of true ribs, 5 pairs of false ribs. And then within the false rib category, we have 2 pairs of floating ribs. Okay, so it's kind of like, you know, a square is a type of rectangle. A floating rib is a type of false rib. Okay. Now we have the vertebral column. So in between each vertebrae, we have intervertebral discs. So we have 7 cervical vertebrae in our neck, 12 thoracic vertebrae in our thoracic region, 5 lumbar vertebrae in our lower back. Now, if you think about the thoracic, it coordinates with ribs. 12 thoracic vertebrae, 12 ribs. Then we have the sacrum. That is 5 bones that have fused together. And the COCCYX, that's our tailbone, that's 4 bones that have fused together. All right. 2 specific names I want you to remember for vertebrae. You have atlas and axis. Atlas is the C1 vertebrae. That is what your skull sits on top of. And then we have the axis. That's the C2 vertebrae. And this has a very unique joint between the 2 of them that allows this to happen. Okay, so the atlas is the first vertebrae, C1. The axis is the second vertebrae, C2. And here's how I remember it. I don't know if you remember from mythology, Atlas was supposed to hold up the world. So Atlas holds your skull. Second, we're going to cover the bones of the appendicular skeleton. So we have the pectoral girdle. Okay, that's your shoulder girdle. Your clavicle, your collarbone, your scapula, your shoulder blade. Then we have upper limbs, okay, your arm. We have the humerus, You bang it right here. This, ow, not so funny, not so humorous, okay? Then in your forearm, okay? So here's my forearm. Let's move it better view. On this side, the pinky side, that's the ulna. On this side, the thumb side, that's the radius. Radius, thumb side, ulna, pinky side. Humerus is up here. Okay, so now let's talk the wrist and hand. So we have carpal bones. Those are wrist. I'm not asking you to remember any of the individual names. And then you have phalanges, your fingers, okay? You also have the metacarpal bones, the bones of your hand. So you have carpals, your wrist, metacarpals, the bones of your hand, then you have phalanges. In the phalanges, we have 3 types. So let's see, I'll look at this finger. We have proximal phalange, that's closest to your hand. Then we have middle phalange. Then you have distal phalanges, furthest away from your wrist. Okay, so again, proximal phalanges, middle phalanges, distal phalanges. One exception, your pollex, your thumb, it does not have 3, it only has 2. So it only has proximal and distal. It's missing the middle. Now we have the pelvic girdle. Okay, so we have the coxal bone. That's 3 fused bones, the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. So the pelvis is formed from the 2 coxal bones, the sacrum and the COCCYX. That forms this girdle, okay? All right, so our lower limbs. We have the femur, the thigh bone. We have the patella, our kneecap, and then we have the tibia and the fibula. So the tibia, that's the one that is on your shin. The fibula is back around on the lateral side, kind of in your calf area. All right, then for the lower limbs, we also have ankle, foot, and toes. So ankle, the tarsal bones. 2 you have to remember. The calcaneus, that's your heel bone. And then the talus, it sits on top of the calcaneus, and that is what articulates with the tibia, okay? And then we have the metatarsal bones. Those are the bones of your foot. And then the phalanges. And again, same rule. We have proximal phalanges, middle phalanges, and distal phalanges. But the hallux, the great toe or big toe, is missing the middle. It has the proximal and distal phalanges. All right, what bone is this? Let's see if you remember. Time for a quiz. Hyoid. What bone is this? Got to look carefully. What side is it? Thumb side, radius. What bone is this? Ooh, it's one of the tarsals. Calcaneus. What bone is this? Remember, it has the manubrium and the xiphoid process parts of it. It's the sternum. What bone is this? Ooh, it's a sesamoid bone, like a sesame seed. The patella. What bones are these? Don't have to know the individual names. They're the carpals. What bones are these? Well, the thoracic vertebrae. There's 12 of them, like you have 12 pairs of ribs. What bones are these? Careful. Oh, I see it's in the thumb, the pollex, and the hallux, the great toe. Proximal phalanges. What bone is this? Mandible. What bone is this? It's a plat bone. Scapula. That's it. That's names of bones. We practiced some of them. You must know them all. Okay, so I hope that you learned something new today.